John Meacham,
Yep.
I would guess you would say that, like so many other things, nationalism is a good starter, but probably a pretty poor finisher.
It is. You know, a nationalist venerates one's own people, and usually a narrow slice of those people, and fails to recognize the broader place of a country in the world, and also puts actual power at the center of your hierarchy of at the top of your hierarchy of values. There's a fundamental difference between patriotism and nationalism. I think I'm right, and Professor Cloud can check me on this, that when Samuel Johnson said that patriotism is the refuge of scoundrels, he really meant nationalism. And I think that it's wonderful. I mean, occasionally, although we've been told, I'm going to try to say this as much as possible, that there's no proof of anything, which is the new Trump doctrine. And I think it's going to look really good on the library wall at Mar-a-Lago in the fullness of time. You have this admission that what the president is doing here is dealing out of a familiar, blessedly not particularly American, but a familiar playbook of putting identity, and a very specific kind of identity, at the top of his hierarchy of values. And that's why you have the anxiety about immigration. I'll say quickly also, the worries about immigration, that's a symptom, not a cause. Right? I mean, Joe was talking about what Democrats have to say. This is about, it seems to me, enduring and now almost permanent anxiety about the stability and access to the middle class. And you're looking, and basically white folks are looking for someone to blame for the fact that they feel that their opportunities have been limited. And immigration is just the particular manifestation of that.
But Jonathan Lemire, you've been reporting, the Associated Press has been reporting, though, that this great blue tsunami that everybody had talked about now is going to be a trickle. There's a question of whether there's going to be a blue wave at all. And we just heard Jeremy Peters talking about how a moderate in Iowa was questioned repeatedly about the caravan. I'm getting texts from friends and family members that are texting me about the caravan. They really do believe that it is on the border of Mexico, and it's going to be showing up at their mall somewhere in western Des Moines by mid-afternoon.
That's right. I mean, making predictions after 2016 seems like a bit of a fool's game, but certainly strategists that myself and my colleagues have talked to in both parties suggest that yes, the idea of the blue wave seems to have been slowing down. Both parties feel like the Republicans are going to keep control of the Senate. The House still certainly favors the Democrats, but it could, instead of being a landslide, it could just be the fate could be decided by a couple of seats. It could end up being very, very close. And yes, the caravan here is something that the president, after seeing it on Fox News, after talking to allies, or taking some cues from people like former Speaker Newt Gingrich, has really seized upon as his closing argument. It's an argument with a lot of playing on fear. It's preying on the hardline immigration rhetoric that he knows was so successful for him, or believes was so successful for him 2 years ago. And he told us in an Oval Office interview with the AP last week that this is reminding him of 2016. And part of that is this idea of the caravan, which is receiving sort of outsized coverage on cable news, has become something that he and his supporters will rally around. They could play into that same idea of the other, of the idea that here are more people who are coming to potentially change our country, take away our access to what we have always thought was the American dream, our sort of right to the American dream, and that they feel like this is, combined with the controversy over the Kavanaugh hearings, that they think this is how they can sort of have that final sprint to the election day.
Well, I mean, for anyone who's still on the fence as to whether or not the president is using racism to stoke fears, just keep in mind, this is the man who during the campaign wouldn't say anything bad about David Duke when asked face to face. This is the man who, when Charlottesville happened, said there were good people on both sides. He couldn't even be on the side of the right then. And now here the president is defending his use of the word nationalist, and he's saying he just didn't understand the racist connotation. Take a look.
Just to follow up on your comments about being a nationalist, there is a concern that you are sending coded language or a dog whistle to some Americans out there that what you really mean is that you're a white nationalist.
I've never even heard that. I cannot imagine that. You mean
You've never heard that expression?
I'm a nationalist. No, I never heard that theory about being a nationalist. I've heard them all. But I'm somebody that loves our country. When I say a nationalist,
He also was a birther on Obama. Yamiche, what do you think?
I think that there are two sides to this, obviously. The president is claiming, as he did, he said, I remember last time he said he didn't even know who David Duke was. He didn't know that he should disavow him. So there's this idea that the president tries to kind of say that he's ignorant of the things that are so clearly in your face when it comes to understanding race in this country. And there are people who mix the word nationalist and patriot. And just came back from West Virginia, just came back from a red district in California, where people see the president and say, well, this is what I want, someone who talks about America in this glowing sort of way. It doesn't talk about the flaws of America. But there are so many people who listen to President Trump and say, nationalists, you know not to use that word. You know that word is going to be seen as you saying that you're a white nationalist. And I've interviewed as a black woman, white nationalists who say they're more excited than ever about President Trump. They said that they've never heard of a president quite like President Trump, who's really, they feel like espoused their ideals. So this is a white nationalist telling me this. So it's not as if white nationalists are saying, are trying to hide this. But I think the president here has settled on this strategy of fear, this strategy of misinformation as the midterm closer, and it's working. I've been in districts where people are literally just repeating what President Trump is saying to them, saying that the caravan is going to be here before we know it and that people are going to be overrun, and it's simply not true.
You know, Joe, back when we were talking to Trump and he was playing the game with President Obama and stoking fear and doubt about where he was born, do you remember what he said to us? He said, I know, but it's working. And we had to push back hard, saying that was wrong and that wasn't who we thought he was. But he kept saying, it's working, it's working. He knows what he's doing. And anyone who thinks that he doesn't know what he's doing about this and he isn't using racism to stoke fear, I think at this point is lying to themselves.
Well, you know, actually, I remember the exact conversation. It was at the very beginning of the campaign. Probably in August of 2015, and we both were saying to him,
we went there to tell him to stop.
If you ever want to be seen as a serious candidate, you've got to drop the birtherism. You've got to say that Barack Obama was born in America, and you've got to say, you take him at his word, that he is a Christian. You will never be seen seriously if you don't do that, because he was talking about it and asked, like a lot of candidates asked our opinion, and that's what we said. And I remember, Mika, you actually being very emphatic, saying you have got to stop with the birtherism. You have got to tell everybody that he was born in America. And I remember Trump whispering under his breath, well, if I do that, I'll lose about 47% of the party.
And he loved that it was working. It was disgusting. It was really hard.
Yep.
It was hard to see him playing that.
So, Willie, there has always been a calculation in there. Donald Trump, people always ask, hey, you knew Trump for a decade. What was the guy like before he ran for office? And I say, well, he would say things behind closed doors that were offensive in one way or in another way, but never on race. Never. We've talked about this. Al Sharpton's talked about this. You've talked about this. Like, Donald Trump would go to boxing matches in Atlantic City, and he would be surrounded by black celebrities. He actually had a very good working relationship with a lot of black celebrities, and we actually sort of joked about it during the campaign that people like Jay-Z, if they were ever for Hillary, they'd say, well, this isn't personal against Donald Trump. And so obviously this is something that Donald Trump has picked up and he's run with it for the most cynical of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously examples throughout his past in the 1980s when he called for the death of the Central Park Five.
Right.
The death penalty, even after they were exonerated, he leaned on that. And talking about the birtherism, I can tell you, and you probably had the same experience, in the course of private conversations and debates with him, he started to believe the birther thing. He was invested in that. He had very specific questions and ideas about why a family would put an ad in the Honolulu Advertiser announcing the birth. Who does that? He actually believed the birther thing. So, Eddie, yes, he is a very cynical man. He's a cynical politician. His quote yesterday will live forever, I think. I don't regret anything. It all worked out very nicely. He was talking about the Ted Cruz accusation about JFK and his father, but that could be a doctrine for Trump. So he does use these to his benefit. The ends do justify the means, but it also, a lot of this lives within him.
Yeah, there's an old Southern phrase that's often attributed to Maya Angelou, right? That when people show you who they are, believe them, right? And Donald Trump has showed us who he is since the election and over the last 2 years. Look, when you say I'm a nationalist in front of that crowd that's majority white, in the context of your race baiting with regards to immigration, we know that immigration law in this country has always been about race, ever since the first Naturalization Act, right, in the 1800s. We know that that's the case, right? And then the idea that Jonathan said that the blue wave might be a blue trickle because it's working. So we're talking about the moral character of Donald Trump, but by extension, we're talking about the moral character of the nation. What does it mean that this is working? What does it say about who we are? Right? This is profoundly racist. And we have these moments in the history of the country where we can actually change the course of our pattern, the direction. We can actually be otherwise. But in those moments, it seems to me we have always historically chosen to double down on a notion of whiteness. And here Donald Trump is putting it before us again. And it seems that every single time that we do it, democracy takes a body blow. And so here we are in this moment where what we think is a blue wave, which I think will be determined by those unlikely voters, those non-voters, may turn into a trickle because people are choosing to be racist, Jonathan. They're choosing to act on the basis of their fear, and that fear is rooted in the fact that white people think that they can't have the life that they should have as white people.
Right. I mean, and some of the polls tightening might just be the natural inclination for people to come home to their parties during the stretch run of a campaign. Not everyone follows the midterms as closely as perhaps we all do. But there's no question here that the president has seized on a few issues, immigration, which of course in many ways means race, and that is generating enthusiasm among people, some Republicans who previously had been very sort of despondent where they saw the 2018 election go, who had felt that this was sort of a lost cause this year, and now feel like they have a reason to come out against. Some Trump supporters who were there for him in 2016 who were not traditional Republican voters, who the people that pollsters missed 2 years ago, those unlikely voters in places like Florida and Pennsylvania and Michigan, people who weren't being counted on in the samplings of, these are the people we think will show up on election day, and who perhaps wouldn't have come out because Trump's name wasn't on the ballot, but now seem to be responding to the idea that this is a referendum on him and his issues, which are also in many ways the issues that they believe in, even if they don't want to admit it publicly.
Well, history will record 13 days from now whether this works or not. For decades to come, for generations to come, history will record whether Donald Trump's appeal to racism and bigotry and hatred will work or not. Here's the incredible thing, that in 13 days, you will have the choice to determine how history is written, more so than any election in our lifetime. This will be either a verification of who we have been or a rejection of who we have been, and a determination of where we are going if we still believe that we're one nation under God, and if we still believe that out of many, we are one. And so we can't say whether this is working or not, because we won't know whether this is working or not until you get up 13 days from now and take your family and friends to the school nearby you, or the post office nearby you, or a community center nearby you and vote. Do you realize that? How awesome is that? How awe-inspiring is that? That you, not me, not Mika, not anybody on this panel, you have the power to write history and determine whether what you're seeing on TV every day works or not. And you've got 13 days to call your friends, your neighbors, your loved one, whatever party you're in, whatever side you're on, however you want this election to turn out. The history of this country, who we are and who we will be determined 13 days from now. That's pretty powerful. Katty Kay, it's not just in America where these decisions are being made. They're being made in Britain. They're being made across Europe. They're being made in places like Poland and Hungary. And democracy with a small d actually does seem to be in retreat over the past few years, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think this debate about patriotism versus nationalism is playing out in other countries too, and other countries are watching how it's playing out here. It's clear patriotism, if Donald Trump had chosen to say, I'm a patriot, no one would have been shocked. But it's this idea of nationalism, which in this country has connotations of white nationalism and race, and in Europe has connotations of fascism and a takeover of power, but is always associated with power. And whether you want to grab power from other groups, patriotism is a love of your own country and your own values. Nationalism has to do with taking power from other people. The other thing, we started this show this morning looking at viciousness in language, and it's becoming an American export at the moment. During the course of this weekend, Theresa May was called upon by members of her own party to bring a noose to the next meeting that she had with them because she was entering the killing zone. That is the kind of language that we are hearing around the world in politics at the moment. I'm not saying that it's coming directly from the United States, but the kinds of language that Donald Trump chooses to use when he gets up at rallies is fostering an atmosphere like this, where people feel they can use this vicious, angry language to the detriment of other people and to the detriment of our democratic processes.
Still ahead.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.